Hello and welcome. My name is Jasmine Dymond, and welcome to the first episode of On the Move, where we're going to talk a little bit about sex work. We're going to talk to some sex workers. We're going to talk to some porn stars. We're going to get into everything COVID related, everything sex work related, and we're going to talk a little bit about the industry and some of the perks and struggles that sex workers, well, male sex workers, are going through. So let me bring out our first guest. His name is Felix. He is from the nation's capital, and he also does porn. So let's bring him out.
Thanks for having me, Jasmine. Definitely not a porn star, more of a porn guy. Definitely D-list level, but it's all good.
As far as I'm concerned, once your name hits the charts, you a star. So yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell us where you're from. Tell us a little bit about the industry that you chose to work in.
Sure. So I am an Ottawite. I feel like this is almost a cliche, but before going into porn, I was trying to make it professionally as an actor in theater and film. So I did the whole move to Toronto, get an agent, go out for all of the auditions things. And one of the things that I found especially frustrating is, as a kind of boyish looking guy who is not the most muscular and is a little bit shorter, I found I was typecast in this very narrow character bracket where I was really only called out for nerds who are the butt of a mean joke, high schoolers with like unspecified soap opera disease, or like rubber suited monsters who come out of the woods and terrorize hikers. So not exactly the Hamlet that I had kind of been preparing for in theater school, right? And that's fine, and you can make a living for yourself as a character actor, but it means fewer opportunities and a lower caliber of kind of roles that are available to you. So after 10, 15 years of doing that, I got fed up with it and was like, you know what, I'm gonna move back home, I'm gonna go back to school. And that's when I decided to maybe give porn a try, because it's something that I had always wanted to try out. It was something that was kind of exciting and slightly forbidden. But it was something that I had always considered to be off limits while I was pursuing film and theater professionally because of the potential conflict of interest. And one of the things that I found really empowering and exciting about porn is that all of a sudden I was the sexy one, despite not having the kind of prototypically attractive physique that we associate with like a cis masculine heteronormative kind of beauty ideal. All of a sudden, despite the fact that I am small and boyish looking and not that muscular, I could actually be sexy for once. So that's something that has been really exciting and has certainly been a little bit of a pull to the industry.
Well, it definitely sounds like a really good reason to go into porn. I couldn't imagine being typecasted every time going into like my career as, you know, parts just based off of what I look like, because like you said, it is nice to be sexy. It is nice to get other roles besides playing, you know, roles that, oh, I just look like this, so I'm going to be typecasted into this role. And then just kind of, I couldn't imagine taking that on as like, yeah, this is going to be my career and this is how people see me. So this is how I'm going to base, you know, the future of this job. But then doing something like porn changes the game completely. Now you are the sexy one. You're the star of the whole performance. And I couldn't even imagine how great that actually feels to be able to not have to deal with going into work every day knowing that you're going to be typecasted.
I mean, to be fair, there are still hierarchical beauty ideals within the porn industry. Let's not pretend that those don't exist. But of course, as queer men, as queer people, it's a little bit less prescriptive than working within an environment where it's all catering to a kind of heteronormative audience, and where everyone is expected to have a leading man kind of Magic Mike look.
So besides the whole like typecasting and, you know, finally getting this sexy roles, what's great about doing porn? Like, what would you say is actually like the reason why you're still doing it versus like saying, oh, well, I wanted to try it when I was younger, so this is why I'm doing it now. What's the great reason why you continue to do porn?
Uh, I suppose it is flexible. I am, to some extent, my own boss. It is empowering. It is something where I feel sexy doing it, and where in 10 or 20 or 30 years, I can look back on it and say, yeah, for this brief moment, I was actually doing porn professionally. It's certainly a conversation starter. Um, so there's a lot to love about it. It has its own challenges, as any kind of industry does, but I'm
Right.
sure we'll get to that a little bit later.
I'm not gonna lie. It's been a long time since I've been in the porn industry. I haven't done porn since I was like, I think my last video was when I was 20, so eight
So
years
like
ago.
3 years ago, 2 years ago.
I know it's shame of my age. It's been 8 long years since I've been doing porn. But I'm not gonna lie, the one reason why I wanted to do porn uh, was because I wanted to look back and be like, I did that. Look how hot I looked. Even though now I'm looking at it going like, ooh, I really wish I didn't have a chin strap in that video or a goatee or whatever. But looking back at it, I think it's so great now that I'm older. I can look at it and go, well, these are definitely things I would have changed, or these are things I would have done differently. But I have no regrets about doing it either. I was my own boss. I made my own schedule. I got to choose my own stars to work with. Well, within a budget. Uh, we get to actually make up those rules, and we get to keep ourselves safe versus going into an industry that could potentially be harmful, could potentially, uh, be stigmatized or whatever. This is a job where we go in and we're the boss. It's our bodies. We're in control. Yeah, there's a script. Yes, there's, whatever. But when I was doing it, I had a blast because at the end of the day, well, I had fun with a really sexy person. And uh, it was all on our time. It was on my time, and being the boss is boss. Like,
And I think this kind of connects on to another thing that you and I were talking about before, which is the idea of there are so many different types of sex work, and some types of sex work are a better fit for some people than others. And certainly doing porn is something that is very much within my comfort zone because there are certain controlled parameters. Like I know that there is going to be testing. I know that I'm going to be working with someone that I'm comfortable with.
right.
Um, so it's something that I think is a very good fit for me personally. And that's something that I really like about it.
So I guess it's safe to say that as far as how broad the spectrum of what makes you a sex worker is, I think it's safe to say that you've dabbled in pretty much just porn.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there have been one or two moments where I have done uh, sex work in exchange for money, but it isn't really my thing. Um, and it's not really something that I feel is well suited to me at this moment in time. So I am perfectly happy just doing porn. That
Right.
is my comfort zone. And yeah,
Nice. So, how long have you been in the industry? I know you personally, and I remember, when you first started doing porn, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about like how long has it been and going into the industry, what was it like?
I mean, it's a funny thing because when people ask me how I got into porn, I think they're expecting a more complicated answer than I give them, which is I went to several of the websites who had models that looked like me. I went to the apply to model section and I applied to model. And it's that simple. Um, I've been doing it for, I want to say, a little over a year and a half. But of course, for much of that time, we have been in COVID. So that has certainly thrown a bit of a wrench in the gears in some ways. Um, but yeah, on and off for about a year and a half.
Nice. That's actually pretty decent. I know when I was doing porn, I was only really in it for a couple of years, and I was super on and off. Even though I was doing more than just porn, I was dancing at a couple of clubs. I was go-going a couple of clubs and stuff. So I kind of dabbled in a lot of the uh, different types of the industry. Um, Now, you mentioned something I want to kind of like touch base on as far as being in the porn industry and knowing, that you're in control and everything, how hard or difficult was it to get testing and services during the pandemic? Like, was it difficult? Did it make it easier in certain ways? Was it harder in certain ways to get your results?
Nightmare is perhaps unkind, but not inaccurate, because of course, prior to the pandemic, we would have like a drop-in for men who have sex with men here in the city. And it was pretty reliable testing. It was comprehensive. You would have results a little bit more quickly than if you went through the public health. And of course, the other factor is doing porn. You want to have a record of your results, right? And that is not really something that is as readily available through the public health. You have to wait like 2 weeks after you get your test results before you can have a paper record of it. And they typically only call you if something pops up during the testing, right? So if you are called up by a studio and it's like, hey, do you want to do a gig next week? That's enough time to go get tested. It's not enough time if you're getting tested through the public health, and it's certainly not enough time to get tested and treated. So speed is kind of, it's necessary if you are working in the sex work industry. And that has been something that has been very tricky. I have been lucky because I have a very, very understanding and wonderful prep doctor who I have been able to do some of my testing through, which is a lot quicker than the public health. And it gives me a record of my test results through like an online kind of portal. You can also go through campus services, but it's also tricky because labs have been overburdened during the pandemic. Now that things are reopening, there's a huge wait for these kind of services because a lot of people are going out and getting tested. So it certainly has not been easy.
So you mentioned that in porn, a lot of it's shot in Montreal, and a lot of people know that the porn industry is in Montreal, but it's not our only city that does porn. I've done some video shoots in Toronto. We did a couple in the US back in the day. But as far as, living in the capital, living in Ottawa and dealing with the restrictions and stuff, how was it traveling to Montreal? And were you able, because of the border lockdowns and stuff, were you able to even get to do your work when it was called on you to be there?
No, not really. And I mean, one of the really frustrating things is I actually had a couple international gigs lined up about a week or two before the lockdown started back in March of 2020 or whatever. So that has kind of been on hold and is still on hold for the foreseeable future. In terms of domestic gigs, yes, many of them shoot in Montreal. And I was able to shoot a little bit during the pandemic when things were at enough of a lull, when the lockdowns were working and cases were down enough that it felt like it wasn't totally irresponsible to travel and do them as someone who is an out-of-towner. But in my situation, I live with my parents. Their safety needed to come first, especially prior to vaccination. So for the most part, it has been off the table. And that has been challenging because after so many years of struggling to succeed as a mainstream kind of theater and film actor, and then finally finding my niche, it's been hard not being able to do it for the better part of a year, year and a half, while watching other people who maybe live in less restrictive cities or in Montreal continue to shoot. So yeah, it's been tough, and it certainly has been a consideration, is safety and of course any border closures.
Do you ever find that, like, when you're going to Montreal, there's ever now I would love to say that my education prepped me to be bilingual, but they didn't. Um, so when I was working in Montreal, I found it really difficult to be able to find services and organizations that, one, was okay with me speaking English, because when I was in Quebec, I found a lot of the time people just didn't want to talk to me back in English, even though they can speak English. They just preferred that I don't know, I suffered and didn't know what they were talking about, or tried harder to speak French or whatever. And I found that, like, when it came to finding services, it was hard to know which services to find because everything was in French, and which services weren't stigmatized by sex work. Do you ever find that, like, in Montreal, it's easy, it's hard, you know, when you're traveling between cities? Do you ever notice, like, sometimes you're kind of on your own?
To some extent. I mean, I've been pretty fortunate because, of course, the production group that I have mostly worked with in Montreal has been very accommodating. Most of their staff has been bilingual, and a lot of when you're working in porn, I think there are a lot more factors that are predetermined than if you were perhaps working as an escort. But yeah, it certainly, if I were staying there long term, for instance, it would be useful to have a directory of other sex workers who I could rely on, or a list of community organizations who I might not be familiar with as an out-of-towner, who I know I could go to for help in my language of choice, in my spoken language.
Right. Well, it's a good thing that we've created TOMQ then, because at the end of the day, I knew from experience that finding services and finding reliable services was hard enough as it is. But then being able to know that I can actually look for those services, find them, and then find them in English. So one of the most important things when we created TOMQ was that when you go on the website and you click on the city that you were entering in, that you can translate everything that's on that website. Now, everything that's on that website are not stigma related. The people that work in these organizations are not stigmatized by sex work. So you're already safer walking into those places. But walking up to those places, knowing exactly what they're going to be able to do for you is like key. Because I don't know how many times I was in Montreal, needed my paperwork, and ended up just going to the hospital because I didn't know where the clinics were. I didn't know which ones were sex positive, let alone sex work positive. So that was number one for me, was like, you know what, if we're gonna do a resource site that's based in 4 of Canada's major cities, we have to be able to accommodate. And that goes both ways, right? We can't just accommodate the English, and we can't just accommodate the French speaking people. We need to be able to have something where we can all use the same resource and find the exact same services that we already know and trust. And building up those relationships with sex workers just makes us even more stronger as time goes on, because we'll be able to tailor our needs with this site. So I'm super stoked to get this on the go, and I definitely want to thank you for coming out to doing this interview and talking openly about your work. I know this industry is daunting when it comes to speaking openly, so I definitely want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.